for our last session of the day on mentoring undergraduate GIS research experiences online during COVID. Yeah, so research is one of those things that was probably significantly impacted in the pandemic and quarantining and not having the opportunity to work with students face to face. So I'm looking forward to your presentation today, Chris. So
Right.
I'm going to shut up and turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate all the work that you and your team have been putting into this conference. I know it wasn't easy to turn something that was going to be in person to virtual, but you made it happen, and it's been really, really great so far. So thanks again. So as Chris mentioned, this is basically about the ideas about undergraduate research and how we can maintain undergraduate research under this time when we're not meeting face to face and in our usual lab facilities and how can we make this happen? So I think in my abstract I had written something to the effect, kind of a overarching question that said, is it possible to have effective undergraduate research under times of quarantine? And I was thinking a lot about this because right at the pandemic midpoint, it was in the spring semester. I was actually on family leave at home with my newborn baby, and I wasn't teaching classes directly, but I was involved with a research project that I'll talk about here in a second, and conducting my research with my undergraduates, even though I was at home, and we had been collaborating via video conferencing, and sort of new to me, but I was trying to see how well it's going to work. But I'm also on a science symposium committee. It's sort of STEM disciplines get together and talk about speakers that we're going to have on campus and different types of activities geared towards engaging undergraduate research on our campus. And a number of my colleagues were saying that, just as Chris had mentioned, that they basically had to put all of their undergraduate research activities on hold. No students are going to be in the lab, so therefore basically all undergraduate research for students has just been stopped, and that took a real hit into a number of different things that are related to undergraduate research on campuses, right? So there's the undergraduate research assistance that goes along with faculty research, but also undergraduate research projects that are related to what students want to prepare for themselves to apply to graduate school or go into the workforce, and to even share their work at student research forums like end of the semester, spring semester student research poster days, and I'm sure most campuses have some kind of student research symposium where students generally share their research. So I was sort of racking my brain about this, right? So basically what I wanted to share with you today was some of my thoughts about what it takes to engage students in undergraduate research, and what types of research are possible when you're basically not within the same range of physically with your students. Okay, so I'll talk about undergraduate research in general, and what makes for good undergraduate research. And then I'll talk about 3 projects that I worked on in the spring, then the summer, and then the things that I'm doing here in the fall. And then I'll wrap it up with some sort of summary recommendations for everyone that's outside of GIS, right? So I'm talking about this more about facilitating undergraduate research more so than the particular details of my field in particular, though it's relevant to the conversation. Okay, so what is undergraduate research, right? That's sort of a interesting question. We know it when we see it, but what are we trying to accomplish here, right? And probably like many of you, I did undergraduate research when I was an undergraduate, and it wasn't as advanced as a field of study, that we have today. It was, this is back in the dinosaur age when people were doing doing research, and we called it more mentoring or graduate school preparation is a lot of what I had taken away from my mentors when I was an undergraduate. But what is, why do people do undergraduate research? So a good starting point is the Council on Undergraduate Research. They host a national conference on a wide variety of fields. And straight from their website, it describes that these are sort of the hallmarks of why we want to do this, right? So you want to, we improve upon student learning by doing hands-on work. Ideally, it's going to increase retention, right? So in the STEM fields, it's a real problem. We have students that leave their major, they become disaffected by their the grades and the testing and the difficulty, and so they drop their major and go into something else. We also want to increase student graduation, right, and student success. Okay, so I already mentioned about graduate education. Uh, Oftentimes that when this is discussed from National Science Foundation and other organizations, there's a pretty intense focus on the outcome of the undergraduate research. We know it's successful when we place students into graduate school, and then they go on and they get PhDs, and we replicate the whole academic environment, right? But there's this whole other area, right? And that's improving career preparation. And Cortland, we're a primarily undergraduate institution. And we do have quite a good success of students going into graduate school and in fact, going on and getting PhDs. And however, the vast majority of our students almost entirely go directly into the workforce. And that's something that I wanted to focus on, particularly the field that I'm in, geographic information systems and geographic technologies are geared towards workplace practice. And then lastly, we have these general skills, critical thinking, creativity, problem solving, independence. All of these things are sort of the key ideas of improving general skills that students have, and providing some kind of evidence of these when students go into the workforce. So I mentioned at the break that I teach a senior seminar class where students apply for, basically they go through the motions of applying for a job, and I try to reiterate the importance of having some form of evidence that describes that you have these skills and capabilities, right? It's one thing to say, oh, I'm really creative, right? But you want to have some sort of evidence behind that. Okay, so what makes for a good undergraduate research? There's basically 5 elements that are sort of related to what I just talked about. I just talked about this from the student, the student side, what we're trying to accomplish with students. That's pretty evident from the Kerr 5 points that they just provided. But there's also the faculty side, right? So, a faculty member can benefit from the research productivity of students. You can also learn how to better teach and prepare students, and also communicate with students, right? So there's a lot to be learned from the faculty side as well. And I always feel like this is an ongoing process, right? Not everyone is an expert at coaching young people, and that it's a skill that can be further developed. Thirdly, there's a partner side, right? So I'm going to talk about these projects where there's a third party involved, right? So there's the faculty person, there's the student, and then I try to partner with another organization. It could be a community organization, it could be environmental organization, where students are having some interaction with someone that is doing applied practice, and that's not easy, right? That's one of the difficulties. And lastly, outcomes. How do we know that it was successful, right? And there's these outcomes like student research posters and student work products. But gauging development in students is a little bit more difficult to do, right? And lastly, there's the personal development, right? So I find I mentioned something about getting feedback from employers. So oftentimes I take feedback from employers about our students and their student internships and, what employers want on the job. And almost all the time they bring up the same issues, right? Number one issue that they bring up is student communication, right? The ability to articulate the things that you're doing that summarize the work that you're performing, and whatever problems arise, you want to be able to describe these in some kind of way that people can help you with, right? So articulation of complex processes is a real skill that's often missing, right? And a lot of that's due to I think is compounded by introversion. I think I mentioned that previously. So, and there's these other areas, problem solving. We all try to do that in our teaching, but sometimes it's difficult to do, right? So, in the GIS world, or anyone who's teaching technology or computing, if you teach computer programming, obviously there's always problem solving, but oftentimes technical training tends to be a little canned, and it doesn't include some of the difficulties that people come up when you're actually trying to do applied practice. And students are exposed to that when they do undergraduate research, right? There's not everything isn't perfect and easy to work with. And lastly is time management and independence, right? Things that probably all of us have to deal with. Okay, so as an example, I was going to share three examples, right? The first one is funded by IITG through SUNY. I think Chris is probably aware of this, right? So this was a collaboration that I had with Monroe Community College. And the idea behind this, it was actually great timing for the grant, right? The grant was really about providing virtual internships for students and being able to access GIS software through a virtual desktop experience, right? So this was like cutting edge at the time, right before the pandemic, and now probably many institutions have virtual desktops for accessing complex software in labs that that are generally restricted. But in this case, this was great experience for me personally. I was able to try out a lot of things that I needed to do, and now I just have employed them in my teaching in the fall. So the first part, so there's two undergraduates that I worked with on this project. One was a virtual internship, and the other one was a sort of a teaching assistant that was helping students at MCC with some of their GIS work. So I'll start with my student intern. Uh, he was so obviously you're aware Monroe is a two-year college, so they have a capstone class, and in the capstone, students need to work with an internship, right? So he was interning with my organization, and we were working on a joint collaboration that I have with Hobart and William Smith College and the Finger Lakes National Forest. It's a sounds like it's a big forest, but it's actually a sort of a large agricultural area that has a smattering of forest on it in between Seneca and Cayuga Lake. And basically what I wanted him to do was to help with some of this mapping of invasive species in these locations, right? And so we collaborated. We had one in-person meeting before the pandemic really struck. And I gave him an overview of the project, right? So I had a student that I worked with previously, a graduate student at Binghamton. And she had been an undergraduate at Cortland and then became a master's student at Binghamton and did a bunch of work at the Finger Lakes National Forest, collecting invasive species data, GPS points, and so on. And then I gave him the lay of the land of what was going on with that. And then we proceeded to have our meetings virtually via Zoom. And we met on a weekly basis, right? So every single week, on a Friday, we would get together and talk about his progress that he made on this mapping this GIS data. And it sounds like a lot, right? That's 15 hours of additional work. I guess that doesn't sound like that much, but when people have a full schedule, a lot of times faculty feel like they don't have time with that. But this was really a key element, I think, to maintaining progress, right? These weekly meetings for an hour, could be even 30 minutes, but just the regularity of it really helped him in particular maintain motivation to keep moving forward, especially when after the pandemic hit and students were on basically moved online and were basically on a lockdown. It kind of gave something to look forward to, right? And aside from taking class, you're having this one-on-one conversation with someone about something that you're both interested in, right? And that's a little bit different than talking with your friends. Okay, so we did some additional work here as part of his coursework at MCC. He did some other work here. The conversation kind of flattened out a little bit, but mainly because I felt like he wasn't having the ability to come up with ideas that were going to help advance this project. Right, he was doing a lot of like grunt work that I asked him to do, and things really turned around when I asked his thoughts about things. Right, so basically, we're looking here. The question is, do invasive plants, do they have the same density under intense tree canopy, right? And we talked a lot about that, and then he started to explore that, and I didn't give him explicit direction. He took it upon his own shoulders to kind of look at that and report back to me, and I think that really jazzed up the relationship. Okay, so the end result, he gave a presentation in his class and gave me the obviously these maps to share, and overall his work was really quite good. It was a very responsible relationship, right? He was there, he was always pleasant, enthusiastic even, and it was great to spend that time with him virtually, as if we were having an in-person conversation. And a lot of that has to do with being comfortable with Zoom conversations, right? So not all of my peers feel that way. Okay, one other thing that was going on with the MCC collaboration was my student from Cortland was a teaching assistant for students at Monroe that were taking GIS classes, and you can see our interaction here. We were doing Zoom together. We would co-host virtual office hours for students, and basically I asked him these summary reflections, right? And I think that's often a piece that's missing from student research, the reflection back on what you've learned, right? And that's something I've learned from John Suarez at Cortland. He's really big on reflective learning, and I'm not going to go and read through all this, but basically, I asked him what he had gained from doing this teaching, and he had a greater appreciation for the fact that teaching other people requires giving them some space to make mistakes and to try things on their own, rather than just giving everyone the answers. And I think that was a lot of what we had talked about over that time period. And he put that into practice because I observed his teaching also over the 15 weeks that we worked together. Okay, the next part is about the same student. Connor was doing some work for me as an undergraduate research assistant. In this case, he was doing GIS work for me based on some data that had been collected. So I talked about this earlier with a poster. We collected all this data with students in the fall semester. In the spring semester, we were going to take this data and do further analysis with it. So this kind of gives you the sense. Students went out into the field and collected tree data about the location of trees, and we turned it into mapped data. And once we had that data, Connor's task in the spring semester was to do further analysis with this. So this is the mobile application that we used, iTree, and we did some of the analysis, right? So in this case, the summary analysis was to look at the variety of trees and then create these graphical PowerPoints, right? So I think graphical creations, data visualization is one aspect of undergraduate research that sometimes gets short shrift in our classes. And then there's some other these analytical aspects that that he worked on. And there's some maps that were created. Obviously, this looks, I mean, this is created with GIS software. It's computerized mapping. Basically, what I asked him to do was to look at relationships between the trees and some underlying variables to give us a sense of, you know, how much dollar value do trees provide in different parts of a town. But the thing that he enjoyed the most and probably spent the most time on was what we call 3D data integration. So there is tools that we all SUNY subscribes to, the Esri GIS software, and it makes really cool graphics, and it's a lot easier than it may appear, right? So once we get the data in there, there's some preset kind of like world building tools that are embedded in this that make cool graphics. And you know, we provided some of these tree data that's here, and then we have some textures of stuff in the background. The main point of that is that we wanted to create graphics that are going to answer some questions, right? So he also used some aerial photography that I provided to him. I also did this with Alex, right? So the previous student. The key thing with this is that a lot of the data that they worked with, I gave to them directly, as opposed to data collection firsthand that they would have to go and do themselves, right? So the last part, aside from this aerial photography, were the analytical recommendations, right? So one of the things I wanted to have with this was recommendations to share with a community partner. And one of the recommendations that Connor worked on was about an ecological issue, and the main point is that certain trees dominate the entire forest composition, and that's less than ideal ecologically. But once we came to that conclusion, what I wanted him to do was to create 3D graphics that could be used to share with our community partner, the mayor of Homer, this village that we worked with. And he spent a lot of time making basically a 3D world of the village of Homer, right? And he did a lot of this on his own and reported back. And this was over the summertime. And he was also on lockdown at home. And I think he just went to town on this, right? Just put his headphones on and went to town. And then this came out as an end result. Obviously, a good outcome of this is Student Research Day. So Connor provided this transformations, we call it at Cortland, a student poster as the output. And we also did a conference on Monday, the Applied Geography Conference, where we presented the outcome of his work. Okay, so I also asked him some reflective questions about what he had learned from this, and you know, the depth I think of that's evident in this slide is probably not as great as is actually occurred, right? I think the greatest benefit for him would be our interactions and the ability to ask me questions directly and brainstorm uh, ideas that he might have had anytime over the summer, right? So we met weekly during the summer, sometimes multiple times a week, and it was pretty enjoyable, right? And one of the reasons that we met during the summer is that he also worked with this other group that I have a partnership with. This is in the city of Canandaigua, where I live. The thing I wanted to share about this is that when we did work together, Connor, I, and folks from the Canandaigua Lake Watershed Association had multiple Zoom meetings together where we talked about what we were trying to accomplish over our summer intern activities, and they provided him feedback about the work that he had done. Right. So, he has a comfort level with me. We've been working together for like, 6 to 7 months, but to get feedback from people that you don't know that are professionals in the field, I thought was really quite helpful for him. Okay, again, another reflection. Basically, his thoughts about receiving feedback from the board. And so, yeah, so that ended, and now I'm into the fall semester, and I'm working with a different student. I'll just share with you quickly. This is about the integration between business and technology. So there's a NSF program that encourages students to become technology entrepreneurs. Right. So I've been working with a student who is interested in drone technology. And one of the key elements to this is that students have to learn about communication, right? So the NSF I-Core program is about taking ideas and bouncing them off of employers and people who work in business. And as you can imagine, not all students are geared to do that type of thing, right? So I was fortunate to find a student, Jake, who is really quite good at this, and we're working on this semester. So he's also a drone person. He has his own drone equipment, and here's some of his work. Key element here, obviously, we've been doing WebEx, right? So we moved to WebEx. We have weekly WebEx meetings, and in this case, Dropbox is a key element to this, right? We need to take his work and then upload it into something that we can both share, which is not easy because these are big files. Okay, so I just wanted to wrap it up with some recommendations, right? So circling back to the first part, when I was talking about my lab science colleagues, yeah, when students are not in the lab doing experiments and collecting data, that slows things down. But it is on my radar that the ability to take existing data and do data analysis with it is in all fields, right? It's in STEM. We call it, put your discipline in informatics at the end of it. That's a whole arena of research. Data science is a hot topic where you focus on the data aspects of whatever work you're doing. And then digital humanities, right? If you're in history or in some humanities related discipline, there's data work that can be done along with that, right? The last thing I would say about this is that having applied research and internships, working with partners, I think that really helps, right? It really helps to guide students in terms of what's feasible and what can be done in within a certain reasonable amount of time. The other thing about undergraduate research is that the faculty person has to be committed to doing it, right? So a lot of my contacts that host internships say that sometimes faculty are not available and things just become a waste of time, right? So that faculty input is pretty important. And the last thing is students do improve over time, right? Which is great. But one of the things that's a real challenge, I mentioned communication. One thing that I've noticed with students, and I don't know if it's just one generation, but it's probably everyone, right? Sometimes there's fear in terms of creativity or coming up with answers to not obvious problems, and that's a real challenge, right? I'm trying to encourage students to come up with solutions, and there's no stress, there's no right or wrong answer, but to go out on the limb and be creative sometimes takes a little level of comfort, I think, that can only build up over a certain amount of time. So, okay, I'd like to thank my students, Alex Tedrow, from MCC, Connor at Cortland, and Jake LaPlante at Cortland, and also Caitlin. She was recently married, so I forgot to add her name, that she is from Binghamton. So that's about it. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions for Chris? Have your students presented at any of the career conferences, either the SUNY one or national or anything like that?
Oh yeah, so yeah, that's a great question. So after much cajoling, I got Connor to reluctantly agree to be a participant in the SUNY Undergraduate Research Conference, and of course it was canceled, right? So we also had another conference that we were going to go to, and it was also postponed. But yeah, I think that those are good outcomes. Students sometimes have a lot of stress about it and are a little reluctant, but once they do it, I think it's a really significant boost to their confidence. And I guess the trick is telling them that it's all going to be fine along the way.
Yeah, I mean, just that experience of having to do that, even if it's online, I think helps.
Yeah.
Does Cortland have a Scholars Day for students?
Yeah. So yeah, that's another issue, Chris, that I could ask other folks on the that are in attendance here, that we did one, and it was supposed to be in person, but we moved it to just be students would share their poster and people could it was sort of like a one-way communication. But other institutions have been having more virtual kind of events where you could, it's kind of similar to a poster idea that we had for this meeting, where you can type in questions and then you can have real-time dialogue. I'm hoping that we could move towards that at our campus for the spring. And there's a product out there that a lot of people have been using for undergraduate research conferences.
Do you know what that is off the top of your head?
I was just wrote something about it. Yeah, I'll have to.
I'm sure I could look it up.
Yeah,
well, I have a colleague at Brockport who's the director of undergrad research there, and he was asking me what was good out there to do, something. He was thinking of doing it in Blackboard in the LMS, and IT sort of balked at that. So he was trying to find another low-cost solution. I know there's
Right.
plenty of things you could pay for out
Yeah.
there, but I don't know about Cortland, but a lot of campuses don't necessarily have robust budgets right now for those sort of things.
Right on. I could totally bust your hole, but yeah,
Yeah.
the company I'm thinking of, I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but they're former students at Johns Hopkins, and they formed a startup company, and it happens to be this like symposium hosting software. And
Okay.
yeah.
Well, any other questions out there? We still have a couple minutes left.
Yeah, is anyone else out there hosting a
Yeah.
virtual undergraduate symposium, or have thoughts about that? One thing that did happen is that we posted our student products, broadly defined, on our library institutional repository. And I think that's another thing that, they may not have given a presentation, but they have a persistent URL now of this poster that they created, and they can share it with people when they apply for a job, or put it on their own website. And our librarian that worked on that, Hillary Wong, just did an amazing job. I mean, she was like a one-woman show that made this all happen. And sort of like wrangling students' work can be a thankless task. I mean, it's a lot of email and so on. So yeah. That's another, like, low cost. Well, there's the cost of people's time and effort, of course, but
Definitely.
right.
There's a question in the chat. I'm not sure I quite understand it. Fauzi is asking, can you apply for graduate GIS program? I assume that's what he means, even if you don't have a undergrad GIS degree. I think that's what that means. If you want to.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Most geography or GIS programs are pretty open, right? So graduate students can come from a number of different fields. It's pretty broad, right? So if you think about all the potential areas of mapping, it's like from like the digital humanities. We had a cool workshop through SUNY about that, and then you have like the environmental and geology, and so yeah, it's pretty wide open. I've had students that are in political science or any arena where something like that might be helpful. Even people that want to learn it as a complement to the main stuff that they do. Like if you're in public administration and you're like in government, you might just take that so you can know something about it and talk the lingo when you have to. So
Yeah, it's a kind of a subfield in many fields, or like a add-on.
right, right.
So my degree is political science, and I know a lot of
Oh
people
yeah,
in
right,
political science do that sort
right,
of thing. They have like
right,
special workshops at the American Political Science Association, things like that. Yep, yep.
right on, right on. Yeah, perfect.
So we are at 4 o'clock, and
All right,
I want to thank you, Chris, for a great
great.
presentation. Close out the
Okay,
day,
great.
and I'm going to stop the recording and